How's it going, everyone? Welcome. Leo Gonzalez here. Today we're going to explore now the navigation on React Native. So far we in the couple past videos we describe and we learn and understand is that what is the value proposition of React Native, who made React Native, and what is the inner mechanism of React Native? Since the React Native is given the ability to you as a JavaScript developers to not only develop web application but also mobile apps. At least this is the sales pitch, right? So one language to rule them all, one framework that run on everywhere. So because React is only exclusively to create this user interface using JavaScript, right? So it's a wrapper around the DOM, which means is that you can programmatically create now your DOM elements, aka your React components, by passing props and handling events inside of that. It has an inner mechanism, which is made of three phases: the trigger, render, and commit. So the trigger is when now detect when that change happened or when this state update happened. If this is on the initial render, what it's going to do is to create those elements using the create element method from the DOM, which is in React is just a wrapper around the DOM of this several methods that you can query. And on the render and the commit phase, what it's going to do is to now, once it create all of these user interfaces into a tree data structure, the render tree, now it's going to append that into the DOM using is the append child for that. However, if this is part of a re-render, in other words, when you render is these components as part of the sub child or a child component on the render 3, what it's going to do is to React detect when that state update happens and then now render or evaluate that JavaScript functions, aka your React components, and we're using is GSX because instead of us creating the JavaScript for all of these different user elements, it's much more friendly to combine the JavaScript and the HTML, the GSX. So we write our components in this GSX format, and then when React detect that state update happening at that component, it's going to re-render that, and if that component contains more React components, it's going to continuously call in a recursive way until there is no more components. And then on the commit phase is where it holds the reference on the ideal representation of the DOM in memory, the virtual DOM, to keep sync with the DOM. So because a lot of the time we think that React components are part of the virtual DOM or just virtual DOM elements, right? It also has some additional information called fibers. So, and here's a question. So those fiber is this concurrent mechanism to not using context switching. What does it mean? That is when you want to handle concurrency or when you have multiple step updates, how do you handle that, right? If all of these state updates can happen at the same time or it happens at some point in time, they can overlap at a time. So because of that, and now the OS is known to handle this kind of stuff by scheduling is in the context of OS, process and threads. So a process is just a set of instructions that now leave a program. So the program or a process is a program which contains a set of instructions that now store on this, and when it is loaded into memory and executed by the CPU, then it becomes a process. So most common processes are like program counters, stacks, register. And one important feature of processes is that they have their own memory address space, right? So other processes, if they misbehave, they won't corrupt or interrupt the another execution of another process. So, for example, browsers like Chrome are widely known to use processes on each tab. Since JavaScript at the end of the day is now a single thread, so a thread is this single unit of execution, that it is more accurate to say that a thread is made of the program counter, the register. The program counter is that, hey, what is the next line that needs to be executed? So it keeps track of that. The call stack or the stack, where you now have is the variables and call functions and returning memory address, and the register where you're going to allocate your memory. Now, because threads live inside of the process, and process has at least one thread, it's not uncommon for processes to have multiple threads. So because JavaScript has an implementation of the language as a single thread, it is a single thread language. It means that it's made of these small pieces, which is the call stack, the global execution and variable execution, or global execution and function execution, where you have now the lexical scope, the variable scope, and the call stack and heap, as well as some specific unit of execution of JavaScript to deal with the concurrency or this asynchronous programming, such as the event loop, the macro task and the micro task, and also the APIs that it can have access, or the method, the service that it can have access, platform specific, whether it's on the browser or no. I mean, I think that doing this quick recap is something that is helpful, at least to me, to describe what's going on behind the scenes. Because now, when we talk about threads and processes, and how now the OS actually run these processes in OS, is because it's schedule them using the context switching. And because context switching is so expensive, since now a process switch off the CPU so another process can run, so the OS hold the state of the process at that current position, it means that it has to store the data structure. It needs to store the data from the process inside of the threads, the program counter, the stack, the register, among other stuff. And also with the updates kernel data structures and memory pages, the virtualization of memory pages. So because context switching in process is so expensive in threads, since now they live inside of the process, which has the same shared memory address space, aka the heap, so it's much cheaper, quote unquote, to do this context switching in a threads. However, because this method is so expensive, there are several other concurrency techniques like fibers and coroutines, where the idea is to do this cooperative scheduling or cooperative concurrency. So one process or threads needs to, or one process needs to, one process needs to stop, one process needs to, is because I tried to recap, do you remember that phrase? So one process needs to pass control, which is this. So one process needs to pass control so others process can run, right? So this cooperative concurrency is now at the application level itself, the responsibility to schedule tasks or to schedule long-running tasks that yield periodically the control. So because this requires careful programming, and the reason of bringing up here is the fiber concept, and it's because now when you take a look at the, for example, say, hey, React this, React virtual DOM, you know, React virtual DOM like this, right? They call this React Fibers. Fiber is the new reconciliation engine in React 16, and the main goal is to enable incremental rendering in the virtual DOM. So about this documentation, follow along as it is implemented, prerequisites, reconciliation, basic theory concept, and all that kind of stuff. So reconciliation versus rendering. Scheduling, the process of determining when the work should be performed. Work, any computation that must be performed. Work usually is a result of updating a state, right? And the key point is an UI is not necessary for every update. Different type of update have different priorities. And push-based approach requires the app, you, the programmer, to decide how to schedule work. And pull approach based allow the framework React to be smart and make those decisions for you. And what's a fiber? We're about to hear the heart of the React Fiber architecture. Fibers are much lower abstraction than application developers typically think about. If you find yourself frustrated in your attempt to understand it, don't feel discouraged, keep trying, and it will eventually make sense. When you do finally get it, please suggest how to improve this section. Here we go. We established that the primary goal of Fiber is to enable React to take advantage of a scheduling. And it's interesting because now it has a lot of similarity of how OS runs process and threads, right? Specifically, we need to be able to pause work and come back later. Pause work and come back later, something that generator actually works pretty well with that. Assign priority to different type of works. Reuse previous completed work, and abort work if no longer needed. So slowly but progressively, things started to make a lot of sense here, right? Because it's about scheduling. And it's interesting, I'm gonna make a quick pause here, because when you need to deal with this concurrency, especially when you are as a UI developer, which is something that we do a lot, we query or we fire up multiple HTTP requests. So at some point we need to coordinate all of this response, and this is something that now Promise help us here with this coordination of all of this task or data that will be available at some point in the future. You don't know when, but it will be. So slowly but progressively things started to click here. So I don't want to deep dive into this. I just want to mention that because since this is now the React architecture, or in other words, is and here is when they describe is the reconciliation process. So the reconciliation process is now it is a process of how the VDOM, this ideal representation of the UI that is kept in memory, is synced to the real DOM. So, but in any case, and then after the commit phase, at least in React, you take a look at this. Reference that you got in here, learn to escape hatches. No, it is here, sharing state between components, choosing state, reacting to what it is, adding interactivity, state a component memory, render and commit. Is this one, right? So the trigger, the render and commit. And also you have now the after state of this, which is when the effects happens. Here you have now the use effects or the use ref, and when you can use this. However, the idea of looking at this mechanism exclusively for React and now understanding what is the value proposition of React Native, which is, hey, I'm going to now allow you to render UI elements by targeting is this platform-specific directive, most common directive, but most UI common directive, or in other words, it's most common UI, right? Most common UI. So if you take a look at here, the guy, it is the UI and the interactions. And here you have not only is the style and also to create the views, the UI, but the interactions that you can go with, whether it is handling touch, inputs, navigation between screen, okay? Where now React has a very own particularly navigation, animations, gesture responder systems, and then the connectivity and security, right? So, and that's exactly what we're going to discuss in today's video, and we're going to have a more practical approach of that. So, what I mentioned here is now the architecture of how now React Native, or the mechanism of how the things work. So, because it is made, at least the new architecture from version 0.73, all right? This new architecture, right? Architecture review, which is this one, the rendering and the build tools, all right? Interesting. So the rendering is now Fabric. So Fabric is this rendering system, or this new rendering system that has a lot of this UI code that wants to move a lot of the UI logic to target directly the CSS, the C++ bindings on the host. So the way how now Fabric works, which is something that they describe here, right? The core principles are to unify more of the logic in C++, improve interoperability with host platforms, and unlock new capability for React Native. So the way how this works is because now it has, again, several phases similar to React, like render. In this case is render, commit, and mount. So on the render is when now React transform is or React is execute the logic and create now the elements tree in JavaScript. That is going to be used as the input to create now the React shadow tree in C++. So you have now a reference of the tree done in JavaScript, is created by React in JavaScript and consists of React elements. A React element is a plain JavaScript object, right, that describe what should appear on the screen. So this React element 3, which is just a plain JavaScript object, is now describing what should and is describing what should appear on the screen. The React Shadow 3, which is here, the React Shadow 3, which is created by the fabric render. Okay, this is quite interesting. Oh my god, definitely, this is very, very interesting. So this React element 3, which is created by React in JavaScript, which is now a JavaScript object to indicate what should appear on the screen. Okay, now the fabric, the rendered, it take now the React. Okay, it take that React 3 or React element 3 and create now the React Shadow 3. A React Shadow 3 is an object that represents a React host component to be mounted and contains props that originate from JavaScript. So this React Shadow 3 is now containing all the information it represents is what will be the host component. All right, what will be the React host components? In other words, is the view implementations or the native directive from React. Okay, so this React Shadow 3 is now contains props that originate from JavaScript, but again, they also contain layer information and a fabric React Shadow no object exists in C++. Before Fabric, they existed in the mobile runtime heap. So this reference of the React host components, okay, that are gonna be mounted, okay, this reference, this React Shadow 3 that is on C++, it has information needed to be mounted, as well as the layer information, which is what happened on the commit phase, right? So on the commit phase, now this React Shadow 3 is fully created, all right? The renderer triggered a commit, and this promotes the React element 3 and the newly created Shadow 3 as the next 3 to be mounted. And it also scheduled calculation of its layout. It's like now the mechanism know what are gonna be the elements that are gonna be mounted, right? So it can now on the mount phase transform them into the host view 3. Oh my god, into the host view 3, which is now the directive that you can that the native directive, the native directive. So for example, under the view groups and widget text view and all that kind of stuff. So the phase of the rendering pipeline may occur on different threads. Refers on the threading model. And this particular process, okay, can happens or may occur on different threads. And here we have now the threads or the process that are created exclusively in React Native. One of them is the UI threads. The only thread that can manipulate host view, okay, and then the JavaScript threads. This is where React render phase as well as the layout are executed. So this mechanism happens is on several threads, whether it's on the UI threads, the main thread, the only thread that can manipulate host view, in other words, the mount phase, all right? They can manipulate host view, and the JavaScript threads, this is where the React render phase as well as the layout are executed. So this understanding of at least how the things work, view flattening, is a React component, container component, and title component. So this understanding here, React.js, React Native Fabric, and then the native script. As part of the render process, React Native will produce the following three: the React.js, or the React Shadow, how do you call it? The React Shadow, the React Shadow, the React element 3, the React Shadow 3, and then the components that are going to be mounted, which is the host view 3. Okay. And this mechanism can happen is now at the and this mechanism can happen now at the that's interesting. So this mechanism this mechanism can happen at the at different threads. So the UI threads, which can manipulate, this is the only threads to manipulate host view, and the JavaScript thread. This is where the React render phase happens and the layout calculation. Interesting. So that was quite illustrative. And again, the idea of today's video is to now explore about how we can now create React Native applications that at the end of the day, it exposes some core features and functionality. But when it comes to developing your mobile apps, you also need now way of how you're going to publish that in any store, whether it's an app store or Play Store, and some way of how you can use the navigation or routing. So because all of this stuff are part of the mobile development, frameworks on top of React like Expo provide you this kind of stuff. In other words, you have to create that. In the case of the current company that I'm working right now, which is the Banco de Chile, right? They actually now only exclusively use React Native for that, which is great. But again, in today's video, we're going to explore now is the navigation. Now, we went over to look at how can we create or how first set up our environments using the ESLint to do that. Following is the native and particularly native plugin, React Native plugin in ESLint. Great. And then we look at how can we create now our first React component, particularly our first view, and how you can now compose all of these different UI elements, right? What are some of the common nuances, especially as you now write this user interface that you're going to use at the end of the day is those that are provided by React Native. It makes a lot of sense. And also for styling, you can create your own using now the create React style for that. In other words, is the style sheet namespace for that, which is behind the scenes, do a couple optimizations that it creates just a plain JavaScript object in production, right? And well, how you can now integrate some of these icons in your layout, how you can start to understand is how the layout is organized in your view. Following is the flex model, putting all of these elements one next to each other, but in other words is one after the another. All right, pretty much like the block in is pretty much like the flags in the browser. All right, what you can indicate is what is the direction that all of these elements will be rendered, whether it is in a row or in a column. By default, everything is in a column. And well, how you can add icons to that. And let's now finally, after me talking all of this, Jesus. But I really summarized this in 30 minutes. Now, finally, let's get into this. Navigation. Holy moly, here we go. All right.
So
what I'm gonna do is to take notes from the course made by Katie Kraman, a software engineer that she works previously at Formidable, a social first creative agency, and now she is the software engineer at Expo, this particular framework. Pretty cool, you know, pretty cool. So let's get into this. Oh, let me actually add the GitHub code here. So, this is no, you got it. That's right. Okay, there you go. Cool. Okay, but specifically this one. Good. All right. Good. Now, navigation.
like SVG library website that you might usually frequent would work.
Let me actually is right now make a quick pause here. Be right back. All right, and we are back. Get ready. Okay.
All right, and I think at this point, looking at my I thought that this padding on the edges looks a bit tight, so let's increase it from 8 to 18. Give it a little bit more space to breathe. Next up, let's talk about navigation. So navigation on mobile looks quite a bit different than navigation for web. So if you think about mobile apps that you used, so we have bottom tabs, we have modals, we have a stack navigator. So these are concepts that don't exist on the web. And as mentioned earlier, React Native doesn't come with a navigation library built in, so we need to install one. And in this course, we're going to be using Expo Router. So Expo Router is a file system-based navigation for React Native, and it's built on top of React Navigation.
Okay, that's interesting. So by default, React Native doesn't have a navigation. However, if you take a look at React Native per se, like this, you find explore the guides here on the navigation here. Mobile apps are rarely made up of a single screen. Managing a presentation or a transition between multiple screens is typically handled by what is known as a navigator. So this guy covers various navigations components available in React Native. If you're getting started with navigation, you probably want to use React Navigation for that. React Navigation provides a straightforward navigation solution with the ability to present common stack and tab navigation pattern on both Android and iOS. If you're integrating React Native into an app that already manages navigation natively or looking for an alternative to React Navigation, the following library provides navigation on both platforms. React Native navigation. But I think this is part of the Russia invade Ukraine, killing tens of, okay. It's a genocide. Please help us defend freedom. Well, we are here in the Venezuela. Oh no, man. I don't wanna get started here. The oppressed Olympic. I don't wanna start that. Anyway. No. Yeah, downloads. 30K a week. Follow us on Twitter, that kind of stuff. React Native Navigation provide 100% native platform navigation on both iOS and Android for React Native apps. The JavaScript API is simple and cross-platform. Just install it in your app and give your users the native feel they deserve, ready to get started. But again, apps using React Native Navigation may target iOS 11 and Android 5. You may use Windows, Mac, or Linux as a developing operating system, but this is not This is part. This is actually from Wix. What? Oh, and I get it. Exactly. So React Native, so React Navigation like this. That makes a lot of sense. React Navigation. No, you won't? Really? Okay. React Navigation, routing and navigation for React Native and web apps. Okay. Yeah, build a navigation by yourself is Jesus. Is Jesus, bro. The React Navigation is built by Expo, software mentioned in call stack. Makes so Expo navigation introducing to Expo router. Do you need to install Expo router, React Native safe area context, and Expo link accounts, and all that kind of stuff? Specifically, remove Metro resolve it. Expo router is a file-based router for React Native and web apps. It allows you to manage navigation between screens in your app, allowing users to move seamlessly between different parts of your UI using the same component on multiple platforms, Android, iOS, and web. It brings the best file system routing concept from the web. Next.js is a good example, Next.js and Nox, to universal applications, allowing you routing to work across every platform. When a file is added to the app directory, the file automatically becomes a route in your navigation. Exactly. But features: Native, built on top of our powerful React Native React navigation suites. Expo router navigation is truly native and platform optimized by default. Shareable, every screen in your app is automatically deep linkable, making any route in your app shareable with links. Offline first, apps are catch and runs of apps. Okay, apps are catch and run offline first, with automatic updates when publish a new version. Handle all incoming native URLs without a network connection or server. Okay. Optimize iteration. Routes are automatically optimized with a lazy evaluation in production and defer bundling in development. Iteration. Universal fast refresh across the Android, iOS, and the web, along with artifact memoization. And this is just a technique to say, hey, that's going to save us time anytime we are ready compute something. For example, let's say you want to remember is the birthday of 10 college. So a memoization, which is this computer science technique that say, hey, anytime they give me their birthday, so then I can send some gifts and presents or some bombs like Uma Bomber. Anyway, when that happened, well, I want to not even think about it. I know that. It's like breathing. I don't need to remember that I need to breathe. I do that. I memorize that. You know, it's different to memorization. So, in the bundler, to keep your moving fast at scale, universal, Android and iOS and web share, a unified navigation structure with the ability to drop down to the platform-specific API at the route level and discoverable. Expo routers enable build-time static rendering of web. Again, because this is targeting is the web, React Native navigation is also part of this, and that makes a lot of sense. This is on version 7. Imagine all the hard work that needs to be done here. Oh my god. So this is React navigation. What follow with the fundamental section in this documentation is a third of the most important aspect of React navigations. So it should cover enough you to know how to build your typically small mobile application and give you the background that you need to dive deeper into the more advanced part of React navigation. Let's get into this. Prerequisites. If you're already familiar with JavaScript, React and React Native, then you will be able to move in with React Native quickly. If not, we highly recommend you to gain some basic knowledge first to come back here when you're done. Here are some of the resources that help you out. React Native, main concept of React. Okay. React hooks. Okay, it's using hooks for that. React hooks. And there you got it. And React context. So minimum requirement. It use now Expo by the if you're using Expo, it needs to be this. React Native and TypeScript. Start a template, and there you got it. React navigation is made up some of the core utility, and those are when using navigators to create structure. Again, oh, but this is installation. Oh, okay. So, because now this is even though they use now Expo for that, if you are creating a new project using the template, you can skip the installation step below and move on to Hello React navigation. installing the Elements library, creating a native stack navigation, configure navigation, specific options, and that kind of stuff. Moving between screens, passing parameters to routes, configure the header bars, header buttons, nesting, navigation life cycles, and that kind of stuff. All right, you have now authentication flow, supporting safe area, and all of this. All right, holy moly. Navigator stack, native stack, button tabs. Okay, so you have several of this navigation here built in. Button tabs, navigation stack. Exactly when they show you the navigation here. Navigation stack, button tabs, the drawer, and the material top tabs, which is okay. But this is only for and the drawer. So button tabs, navigating stack, or native stack, or the stack. And this one. Interesting. So in any case, let's get into this. Okay. Exactly. So by default, React Native doesn't have a navigation. You might choose the React navigation. The React navigation, or the Expo router. Interesting. Or the Expo router. God damn it, bro. Or the Expo router, bro. Jesus. Expo router. In our case, we are going to use that. Which is built on top of React navigation. So here we are going to use Expo router, but we know that React navigation is the core of this.
Which isn't a file system based.
So Expo router. Interesting. Expo router is a file-based routing system, similar like the routing from web frameworks like Next.js and Nux. Okay. Yes, that's right. But React navigation does not.
Based routing, but the reason I mentioned that it's built on top of React navigation is,
or React navigation isn't,
that all the properties for screens and screen options that are used in React navigation you can use in Expo router. So a lot of the time I find it handy to look at React navigation docs for these details if they don't exist. Screens and screen options that are used in React navigation you can use in Expo router. So a lot of the time I find it handy to look at React navigation docs for these details if they don't exist in the Expo router docs. So if you used web frameworks like Next.js, you're probably already familiar with file system-based routing. But in case you aren't, the idea is that the file names and folder names in your file system dictate what the screen is called.
Yeah, file base. So in case you are not familiar with it, file base. Yeah, so file base navigation indicates or file navigation dictates what will be the route based on a folder you put it there.
The idea is that the file names and folder names.
Oh, in this case, exactly. So dictates file-based navigation dictates what will be the route based on a folder name.
In your file system dictate what the screen is called.
Okay, file-based navigation dictate what will be the route based on the folder names.
Or the URLs for the pages. So, for example, we start with an app folder. So with Expo Router, the root of your app is an app
the
folder.
File name to URL
so the
mapping
index.tsx,
is
this is your index root. Then if you have a screen called home, this will be your /home root. If you have a folder and then an index, then the index doesn't count, so you'll just have the folder name, in this case /products. And this is an example of a dynamic root where you can pass in anything here and it will be retrieved by the screen as a screen option. So you can, for example, have a product /123 with the product ID. So the file name to URL mapping is a little bit more obvious if you're doing web development, and making it work for mobile is a little bit more tricky because we have additional kinds of navigation. So we have stacks, modals, and tabs. And the key to making this work is a layout file. So
okay, since in native apps we have concepts for navigation like stack, tabs, stack, modals, and tabs. Okay, stack, modals. Oh my god, no, modals, no, stack, modal, and tab.
So anything inside your app folder is a screen or a layout file. A layout file is is a layout file. So anything inside your app folder is a screen or a layout file. A layout file is layout. It's called _layout, and you can have exactly one per folder. And the layout file tells you how the screens in that folder should be laid out. So as
okay. So the layout, but this is very specific to Expo Router. So the layout folder, it indicates how that page
layout, and you can have exactly one per folder. And the layout file tells you how the screens in that folder should be laid out.
Exactly. So the layout file inside of the folder, it indicates how the layout should be laid out.
So as a stack, tab, modal, whether you need
as a stack, tab, modal, whether you need additional headers. exactly, it's a stack, tab, model, whether you need additional headers, right?
To add additional headers, etc. So we'll be following instructions from this Expo router get started docs, but I've copied this into the course site as well. So let's start by installing a bunch of libraries. So we have Expo router, React Native safe area context. So this is basically a library for, if you're on an iOS device, you have or actually some Android devices as well now, you have this header which overlays your content, and the safe area context basically tells you like what area of your screen is safe to use. So Expo router uses that under the hood. So when you do screens in Expo router, they are already by default wrapped in a safe area.
There's a lot of things that is installed by this. Okay. It's formatting. Icons. Icons and styling. It's like icons. Okay. And the other is the native from here. Okay. Where in the F is that? There you go. Native wins. You can say, hey, this will be now React Native. So React or Tailwind. Tailwind for React Native. Exactly. You got it. All right. Cool. Good. And okay, say git stash here, git switch to navigation. There it works. Git stash pop. You got it. And the navigation, that is, I'm fucking freaking lazy. Is the React navigation here. Exactly, say React. So React navigation, which is here. Yeah, and then you have Expo for that. And then you have Expo for that, or the Expo router. There you got it. All right. Before doing that commit, which of course it will work. Okay, now, so let's get into this.
React Native safe area contact get started docs, but I've copied this into the course site as well. So let's start by installing a bunch of libraries. So we have Expo Router, React Native safe area context. So this is basically a library for, if you're on an iOS device, you have or actually some Android devices as well now, you have this header which overlays your content, and the safe area context basically tells you like what area of your screen is safe to use. So Expo Router uses that under the hood. So when you do screens in Expo Router, they are already by default wrapped in a safe area. Then you have Expo linking, because Expo Router comes with deep linking built in. Expo status bar, which is the whether whether this top stuff is like light content or dark content or whatever.
So React Native safe area context, interesting. But again, this is very narrow specific to this. Very narrow specific to this. Very narrow specific to this. Set up the entry point for that. And npm expo install expo router. La 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 la. So you need to install is all of this. So npm install expo router, React Native safe area context is for iOS and Android to know which area can you add element. React Native screens, Expo linking, because Expo linking is it does deep linking. All right. And Expo context and Expo status bar. An Expo status bar, which is the bar at the top to be shown. A bar at the top, yeah, which is the bar at the top that you can manipulate. Okay, let's go to install all of that. You got it. And as you can see here, like this. Say, oh, we're going to install this. And there you got it. All right. So now that I installed that, added config plugin Expo router. Well, did I told you to do that? No, I didn't. But it added a Expo router there. Added config plugin Expo router. To where, bro? Oh, okay. Adding Expo router to that. Okay, again, very narrow specific to. I'm gonna close all of this. To. Now it works. Expo. Okay. So let's go back to the Go here a little bit. As you can see, it actually add this logging here, Expo router, with the command that we run. There's a lot of stuff that is doing behind the scenes for us to
Let's
help
start
us.
by installing a bunch of libraries. iOS. Alright, main field, and then this main field tells you what the main entry point of your app is. So in our case, it is expo/appentry.js field. Stuff is like light content or dark content or whatever, etc. Alright, next up. So this is the case for every JavaScript project where you have a package.json. So in your package.json, you have a main field, and then this main field tells you what the main entry point of your app is. So in our case, it is expo/appentry.js. And actually, if you're curious, if I now open in my node modules, if we go to expo app entry, there you go. So all this does is it imports register root component, which is basically how you tell what the root of your app is to React Native, and it's importing this app file from our folder, so from our own project. So it's importing this file here, the app.tsx. And actually, in some cases, this might be handy if you need to use some native libraries that require you to do things before the register root component. What you can actually do is you can copy this code into your own like index.js, and then point your package.json, the main file, into your index.js, and then do additional things before you register root component. And this is just an FYI because it does come up, but the app entry is basically a convenience function. Alright, so in our case, we are now changing this to be the Expo router entry, and this changes the entry point to be this app folder, which is the root of our file system-based routing. So next up, we want to create a new folder called app, and move our app.tsx into the app folder.
The Expo
and hopefully you have VS Code that automatically updates the imports. If not, make sure that you've updated this. And now let's rename this to index. This is also important. So with Expo Router, you need to have one index file, at least one. So if you don't like using index as your file names, you can get away with using them for most screens, but the main entry point has to be called index.tsx. So now I am getting an error, and it's because I need to restart the bundler. I think I used it in the terminal. Or even open this.
You have this kind of configuration.
There we go. You can see I don't use the VS Code terminal very often.
Configuration is something
so if I now do yarn start, if that doesn't work, you can do yarn start -- reset cache as well. But I think it should work. So now if I reload, there we go. Oh, thankfully I've gotten a warning here because I missed up I missed a part of my instructions, which I got really excited about moving everything to the app folder, which was this, adding a scheme to your app.json. So let's copy this and open our app.json and add the scheme. So Expo Router the reason this is required is that Expo Router comes with deep linking built in. So deep linking is basically like creating a URL that opens your app to a specific screen. And the way deep linking works on mobile is that your
Okay. Expo linking does deep linking. What it means, which is exactly Expo link, what it does deep linking. In other words, open your app at a specific view.
Mobile app registers to listen to a specific scheme. So there will be an intent fired into your phone that goes, hey everyone, there's an intent going into a scheme called Taskly, and then all the phones on your app, all the apps on your phone will basically say, oh no, not for me, or some of them might say, I'm registered to that, give me the URL. That's basically how it works, and that's why it's required. Alright, so now you'll see that it looks exactly the same. So what's now missing is we need a layout file. And actually, the reason that I did this without adding any layout file is that to draw your attention to the fact that all the screens that you create in your app folder get created as a screen in your app, even if they don't have a layout file. So by default, they will be in a stack navigator. But let's add a layout file. So this will be _layout.tsx. So with Expo Router, all the screens and layouts have a default export. So usually with components we do named exports, but in this case we do export default. And function, const whatever, function and layout. So you can name this whatever because it's a default export. And let's return. So we want to render this as a stack. So we'll import stack from Expo Router, and then we render this as a stack. And here you can choose to define each of the screens, so you could pass in additional options.
Should you pass the children? So now the React
so
native.
Here, let's do a stack.screen, and the screen name will be like the file name here, so it will be index. And we can pass in options to the screen. So if I save this now, I get this header, and the header says index. But we don't want our screen to be called index because that's a bit silly, because that's just the file name. We can pass in a custom title. So we'll use the options prop here and do title. Let's call this our shopping list. And save. There we go.
Does schema mean that you'll be using Taskly ://URIs, or is the syntax platform independent so that you can deep link from like a web app?
You do like scheme : //. Yes. There is also like universal linking, which is it's a bit more involved. So we're going to go through deep linking in the intermediate course. We actually deep link into our app using the scheme. But what we're not going to cover, and something that you should be aware about, is app links. And actually, so if I go to the docs here, so if I do linking, there you go. So we got linking and deep linking. Okay, so if we go to the deep linking docs, this describes the linking. There you go. So we got linking and deep linking. Okay, so if we go to the deep linking docs, this describes the more involved deep linking, which basically verifies your URL. So it requires you to upload, there's instructions here, but it requires you to upload a special file on your website and then register that associated domain on your phone, and then you can use iOS app links or the Android app links or the iOS universal links. So those are the options. But the deep linking is basically the more low level and basic.
The deep linking is basically the more low level and basic version of this.
Thankfully, I've gotten.
Okay. Alright. Let's take a break here before moving on, so bear with me. I'll be right back. Alright, we're back. Well, actually, the entire lights changed, as you can see that, but because routing is something that is quite long, I'll prefer to now go over to this, or at least just to take the bare minimum necessary notes so we can move on to finally wrap up the entire application. So, because I want to discuss navigation in the next course, which is again another course taught by Caddy Graman. Where in there we're gonna have a more in-depth uh, analysis, or a more in-depth read about it. Now, yeah, the TLDR of this is that React Native doesn't have any routing mechanism per se or navigation, and unlike the web, you have now different type of navigation. You have the stack and the tabs and modals. And because of that, we are going to use now is Expo, this wrapper around the React native navigation. So let's get into this.
Node.
All right. Now,
I'm the app folder, which was
so there is a couple stuff here that we need to do as we develop this kind of application. One of them is to install the necessary dependency, as I mentioned before. Here, all of this. Expo router, React Native safe area context to actually render this particular context into an area that it can be displayable. React Native screen, Expo link. This is to do this deep linking. The TLDR is give you the ability to now open up your app in a particular page. Expo constants, Expo status bar to show is that bar from Android and iOS properly. And because the routing, unlike the web, here we're using is Expo, which is this file-based routing mechanism, pretty much like the how do you put it, the Next.js file-based routing, but because here we are working with JavaScript projects, specifically Node, the main is the entry point of our application, right? For example, here exactly, the main is the entry point of our application. That's right. What? That's quite interesting that they have some Babel config. We're not. So the entry point here is Expo entry.js. In this case, it's just simple the index.ts, which is this. So now things has changed a little bit. This is when it's going to register now your components in the root elements. So register a root components called API register here. Domain. It also ensures that whether you load the app in Expo Go or in a native build, the environment is set up appropriately. So we need is to it seems that we need to change is the entry point of our apps and say, hey, I want you to go with Expo router. So we say, hey, we're going to change this to the Expo router. Yep, Expo router / entry. There you got it. So here we're going to point is to this entry, which is quite interesting, but I don't see any entry. But this is what we need to do. So Expo router entry
PSX into the app folder. And hopefully you have VS Code that automatically updates the imports. If not, make sure that you've updated this.
So we save this, and now we can starting to use is the app folder and follow the or move now the app.tx into our app. but particularly into, yes, update 4, but it particularly is on the index, because we need
Now
to
let's rename this
rename
to
the
index.
app.js.
This is also important. So with Expo Router, you need to have one index file, at least one. So if you don't like using index as your file names, you can get away with using them for most screens, but the main entry point has to be called index.tsx. So now I am getting an error, and it's because I need to restart the bundler. I think I used it in the terminal. Now if I reload, I've gotten a warning, so I got really excited
So modifying the project config here.
about moving everything to the app folder, which was this, adding a scheme to your app.json. So let's copy this and open our app.json and add the scheme. So
We need to add
Expo Router comes. The reason this
here.
is required is that Expo Router comes with deep linking.
And this is of the app.json. Okay, question. So we change that is on the package JSON for our entry point, and then we update now is the config file, which is the powerhouse of the React Native, or at least it's Expo, but it say, hey, this is the app.json that is indicating that this is now the scheme.
Let's copy this and open our app.json and add the scheme. So Expo Router comes. The reason this is required is that Expo Router comes with deep linking built in. So deep linking is basically like creating a URL that opens your app to a specific screen. And the way deep linking works on mobile is that your mobile app registers to listen to a specific scheme. So there will be an intent fired into your phone that goes, hey everyone, there's an intent going into a scheme called Taskly, and then all the phones on your
So especially when you want to do this deep linking, the way how this works is by going through the scheme and say
your app, all the apps on your phone will basically say, oh no, not for me, or some of them might say, I'm registered to that, give me the URL. That's basically how it works, and that's why it's required. Alright, so now you'll see that it looks exactly the same.
So now let's go to actually is run this npm or using jar star, right? Expo create a tunnel, blah 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 blah. If you open up on iOS, let's get into this. Here we are. Let me show you now is this one, the emulator. What is that is name? Okay, simulator here, and there you go, right? So everything works normal, pretty straightforward. So we don't have any problem or any issue here right now. So far so good. Let me actually. Oh no, what? Oh, you discover. Okay. Let me, in fact, do something like this. Oh, what the French toast? Wait, what? Exactly. Let me put it here. Okay. Even though that this. Okay. You know what? Let me. No. Okay. I need to do this. You can actually see me. Great. Okay. Now, yes. You got it. The phone. Myself here. Hey, howdy. And you got it. Okay, okay. Yep. That's right. Much better. Now, make sure to put it here. So nothing has. So it works as expected. It actually shows us is the proper pagination following this file-based route mechanism provided by Expo, is built on top of React Native navigations, where it doesn't, but you don't have this file-based navigation. Okay. All right.
So what's TSX? So with Expo Router, all the screens and layouts have a default export. So usually with components we do named exports, but in this case we do export default. And function const whatever. Components in a stack. So with Expo Router, all the screens and layouts have a default export.
Okay, all the screens and layout. All right, so let's get into this. So with Expo router, this is part of the JavaScript. Okay, all the layouts and pages has a default export. Okay, so that's exactly what we're gonna do.
So usually with components we do named exports, but in this case we'll do export default. And function const whatever. Function and layout. So you can name this whatever because it's a default export. And let's return. So we want to render this as a stack. So we'll import stack from Expo Router, and then we render this as a stack.
Okay. Let's get into this. So to create now this here, and say inside of the app, I want to create now a folder called layout.tsx. There you got it. I want to get in there, layout here, and because every layout and page is export, it uses export by default. You say export default, and here you can say is the name of the layout, okay, which is a function, say layout, right? Nothing too fancy here. And we're going to now return is the stack from router.
And here you can choose to define each of the screens, so you could pass in additional options. Expo Router, and then we render this as a stack. And here you can choose.
So if I render this, for example, right? And then I say, hey, yarn star, right? And I refresh now the here, or say go home, say clear. Okay, you have now. Here we go. Anyway. So Expo star, yeah, npnx Expo star, please go and run that. Why are you taking so long? Okay, much better. So if I open up that on the emulator, nothing has changed, but as you can see, it adds the index to this. This is quite interesting. So we add now the layout here. You can choose to define each of these of the screen you
to
could
define each of the screens, so you could pass in additional options.
Hey, this is the layout that you're gonna render when
so
you
here,
are
let's
on
do
the
a
app page.
stack.screen.
Again,
and the screen
very
name
specific to
will
the
be
React Native.
like the file name here,
To the
so
Expo.
the index. And we can pass in options to the screen. So if I save this now, I get this header, and the header says index. But we don't want our screen to be called index because that's a bit silly, because that's just a file name. We can pass in a custom title. So we'll use the options prop here.
So when we
and
use
do
the
title.
option here,
Let's call this our shopping list.
or a screen options, now they changed that. Okay. We can pass this the title. No. How do you call it here? Okay, because this is an object. Okay, this is an object that you accept here, where you pass now the title, and here you say, hey, this will be the shopping list. So far, so good.
Save. There we go.
Okay.
Does schema mean that you'll be using Taskly ://URIs, or is the syntax platform independent so that you can deep link from like a web app? Taskly ://URIs, or is the syntax platform independent so that you can deep link from like a web app?
You do like scheme : // Yes. There is also like universal linking, which is it's a bit more involved. So we're going to go through deep linking in the intermediate course. We actually deep link into our app using the scheme. But what we're not going to cover, and something that you should be aware about, is app links. And actually, so if I go to the docs here, so if I do linking, there you go. So we got linking and deep linking.
Yeah, the question is relevant of
So
how
if we go
now
to deep linking
Taskly
docs,
scheme,
this describes the more involved deep linking, which basically verifies your URL. So it requires you to upload instructions. It requires you to upload a special file on your website and then register that associated domain on your phone, and then you can use iOS app links or the Android app links or the iOS universal links.
Deep linking, whether
Those
it's
are
a
the options.
universal
But the
links
deep linking
on
is basically
iOS
the
or
more
the Android.
low-level and basic version of this. Now let's look at the different types of navigation you can do. The basic type of navigation is a stack navigation. By default, everything's rendered in a stack. And it means that when you navigate onto a new screen, it renders on top of the old screen, and then the new screen renders on top of the old screen. So we'll have a stack. So when you go back, it will go back to the previous screen. Let's add a couple.
Stack navigation, that's right. So let's go to actually save this and say, hey, whatever you have right now in status, git add everything here, git status here, git add exactly. Just control, no, what the fuck? Here we're gonna create is set Expo router setup. So you commit this, which is great. Okay, part of the navigation, and we're going to now move to the stack navigation, because by default everything here is in a stack. So stack navigation.
New files. So let's add a counter.
This is Expo router.
So I'm going to copy this file because it's just going to be a default layout where we have a view and a text just as a placeholder. So I'm not going to type it out. There we go. And let's also add this placeholder screen. So idea.tsx. So let's do idea screen. So this will be the screen for whatever you would like to build. Now, there's three main ways to navigate between screens with Expo Router. The default one is using this link component. Just make sure what I... Yeah, the default one is using this link component.
Okay, so
It's
we
also
create now is
add a counter. So when you go back, it will go back to the previous screen. Let's add a couple new files. So let's add a counter. So I'm going to copy this file because it's just going to be a default layout where we have a view and a text just as a placeholder. So I'm not going to type it out.
okay, so you create here this counter here. You got it. So you create now here this counter. Touch app counter.tsx. Alright, and the other is, yep. So you here say, hey, this will be the counter. I don't know where is those nodes that you take here from the navigation here, stack navigation and the counter. So you copy this file and paste this. All right. Yep. And or just to exercise our muscle memory here, you can say, hey, export default the name of the component, which is in this case is the counter, right? But this must be, oh, they call this a screen. Interesting. Export the default a function, which is the JavaScript function at the end of the day. And here you're going to return now is, instead of div, is view and text, right? Say view that must come from React Native, right? And a text as it is, right? So the view style has this, right? Here we're gonna show or render is counter, and some styles that perhaps in the next iterations of this tool you don't have to do that. Now, well, since this is part of the style sheet namespace where you can create or compose, you know, some of this functional approach is like, hey, I can now is create control absolute fill objects with actually fill objects or actually fields or actually absolute fill object, you know, something that we're gonna see that later on. But again, what is relevant here is the create, and of course now the style that we want to provide here. So those styles are now the container, which is following is this key value here. Since this is a namespace, we can say, hey, flex 1. So by default, everything here is now in a stack, or aka on the navigation, everything is on this. By default, everything is on a stack, which means is that the older or the newer screens will be on the top, right? And if you go back, you're going to remove them from the stack. That's one way you need to know a little bit of this data structure and stuff like that. Anyway, justify counter and like items and background color. I was going to actually copy this because this is not something that is relevant for this. As you can see now, ESLink is telling me correctly to say, hey, you know what you're not using is this. And yes, link is right. But let me is now assign this a style, which is just a convention here with this name, to the style property, and pass now the object here to say styles dot container, and then now the style here from style dot text, right? Pretty straightforward, nothing too fancy. There you got it. It's a hey, ESX class does not support attribute because it does not have props property. So it doesn't style. It is a style. But I'm using is this one. Styles because oh, because it didn't import text from anyway, now you do. Okay, similar to create the other one, which is going to create now an idea.
So
let me actually here in fact do something like this. Go to the terminal. Please create now, in this case is the idea.txx. Go into there. Idea, paste this. I'm going to change this to idea screen, right? To idea screen, right? Okay.
let's do. Now there's three main ways to navigate between screens with Expo.
Okay. So according to you, there are three ways using Expo router. No, using Expo router, there are three ways to navigate it. So, so there are three ways to navigate. Okay.
The default one.
There are three ways to navigate between stack navigation between screens. They call screen on the web we call pages. You get the idea. And it is interesting. Why is this? Because on the web is now the server that is quite redundant. Serve the page or serve this document, which is the HTML, and they call this document as a page. Whereas in React Native, it's actually a screen that we render.
Is using this link component. Just make sure whatever. Yeah, the default one is using this link component. So we can import link from Expo Router. And inside here, you can just write some text actually. So you can say go to counter. And this, you need to give it an href of where you want to link to. So let's say we want to link to counter. There you go. Let me just give it some style.
Linking.
So text, align center.
But I just want to
and
go to the
margin
component.
bottom 18.
Core component.
And font size 20.
Core component.
This style isn't that important, I'm just doing it so it will be a bit easier to see on the screen.
Of course,
right, so now
this is
when I click on this, you can see that it navigates another screen on top of my shopping list screen. And you can use gestures actually to go back. So especially when you're doing this on your phone, you can see you can swipe from the side.
That's why, for example, here, again, because now navigation is more interesting and wide open here, it makes a lot of sense to do this kind of stuff. Create page with Expo router. Index.tsx, home.tsx, user.tsx. Platform specific extension. Okay. Hey, you're gonna show this for the web. Hey, you're gonna show this on the native. Okay. Non-route files. Oh, this is using this grouping routes. It's quite interesting because it is using this notion of file base. Recommending the structure, Export Router recommends sorting components and hooks by features and routes by navigation patterns. While the two concepts can overlap, there are enough difference to structure them differently. So you have app, and then you have component, the authentication, and the task, and the profile, and the user. This is the recommended structure of how you can organize your components and screen, right? And then now the navigation between pages. It's taking quite a amount of time. Hello, are you there? Are you becoming responsive? No? Anyway, let's navigate directly here. Okay. And navigate between pages. Index.tsx. And then you got it. And then you have link. Like, so this is how we can navigate to that. Using the link. Or with inside of that actually with a button. Okay. Understanding native navigation. Exactly, it's a stack-based navigation model, which is something that is using by default. Linking to dynamic routes, pushing screen, replacing screen, imperative navigation. But in any case, let's go to okay. All of this stuff relevant to navigation, something we're gonna discuss that in the intermediate course, because the idea here is to now use and understand the core features of React Native. Expo router is not native, so we're gonna see that in other courses. So,
actually, the fun thing about this is if you're on an Android phone, it looks a little bit different. So so on Android. Oh, that's another thing that I didn't mention. So the header actually looks slightly different on Android versus iOS as well. And that's because by default you get platform-specific styling. So we have a slightly different shadow here, so it's using an elevation, and the heading is aligned left. And this is not a mistake or a bug or anything. This is intentional because it looks more natural to the platform. But you can customize it and you can make both of your apps look the same. But yes, anyway, so if you go on Android, you can actually see you can't actually see it that much on this emulator, but on a physical device, you get a different animation when you navigate back. Alright, so the other way to navigate is programmatically. So let me add a text here and say go to idea, and then let's wrap this in a touchable opacity.
which is part of the widely used component that we can go with. So go to idea on the counter.
And I'm just going to copy these same styles.
Okay. So you create now a link that say, hey, you can do this. Here we can move through the index and add a link to this. Yep. like that. So you add now a link to this. Please add this link to this Expo router here, right? And here you can now define is the href, the where you want to navigate. In this case, /counter, and some of the style here you can use for that.
And I'm just going to copy these same styles.
Okay, so you got now style where I'm going to pass now this as an object and say, hey, text align center, as of course center, that's right, center. Here you don't have any of the auto completion. Margin bottom, margin bottom, margin bottom 18. Again, this is not pixels, this is device specific units.
Touchable
right.
opacity. And I'm just going to copy these same.
Font size 24. So font size 24. I don't think you have to pass that as, you need to pass it as number. That's right. And then go to now, and navigate to counter. All right, and then now use touchable from there.
Wrap this in a touchable opacity.
Okay.
And I'm just going to copy these same styles.
Touchable from React Native. That's right. But instead of touchable is opacity. Touchable opacity. That's right. And I'm gonna wrap this into a text.
On the text. There we go.
And now that text will say is, go to the idea. It's pretty similar as we have on, close this, on here, right? It's pretty much, I'm going to copy this. So go to idea, and you have to go to idea.
The other way to, but on a physical device. So the other way to navigate is programmatically. So let me add a text. I think the default you get, I guess, side. Actually, the fun thing.
On the index, go to counter. Oh, okay. Say, go to counter. That's right. And then navigate to this and say, hey, this will be the style for this. I want to say, hey, go to counter and say, go to where?
Well, you can customize it and you can make animation. It is press in a add. Alright, so go to idea, and then let's wrap this in a touchable opacity. And I'm just going to copy these same styles.
Let me round this by saying npnx Expo star. So I don't want to use a tunnel here. I want to open up here on the
text. There we go. Alright, so now we have go to counter, and then we have go to idea. Lovely. So here you can use an on press. So router has a use router hook, so you can do const router to counter.
So now you have to go to counter, so you go to idea, that's right. But look at this, we're using this now as the native navigation. Shopping list, go to counter, and there you got it.
Text. There you go.
This navigation is
Alright, so
like
now
in
we
a
have
stack.
go to counter, and then we have go to idea. Lovely. So here you can use an on press. So router has a use router hook, so you can do const router equal.
Yeah, to actually explore here other type of navigation here by saying, hey, let's go to now use router is one of them, or the specific method.
Use router.
Okay.
So this will be an export from Expo router.
This is use router.
And you can do
from
on
Expo,
press.
right, since this is a hook,
You can do router dot, and you can see all the different things you can do. So mostly you would do router navigate, push, or replace. So the difference between them is that push will always push a screen on top of the stack. So replace will obviously replace the screen, that's a little bit more obvious. But then navigate will navigate to the screen, but it might navigate back. So for example, if I had my index screen, my idea screen, and my counter screen, and then I did router navigate idea, it would actually go back in the stack because an idea screen already exists in the stack. But if you want to guarantee that you're always going forward, so adding another screen on top of the stack, you would use push. So in this case, let's use navigate.
So if you use navigate to preserve that. So we use router navigate to preserve that. So touchable opacity here, that's a method called on press, unlike on click. All right, which is now to say, hey, router dot, instead of push this on top of the stack of navigation, I want you to now preserve the navigation here, like so. So say navigate to here. That's one of the reasons why all of these nuances we're gonna take a look in further detail on the intermediate course. Okay, so this is it. Router navigate.
We want to go to our idea screen. So in this case, let's use navigate, and we want to go to our idea screen. So open that, and then it will navigate to idea.
So if we go to the emulator here, so we go to the counter, it shows the counter. What? It's a warning, cannot update a component forward with a reference in counter like this. I am on the, silly me. This is on press, it's not assignable. Oh, interesting. So you cannot do this. In fact, you must pass is a function to be run. And there you go. Alright, so if we refresh this, we reload this, say go to counter, they go to idea, and of course we're showing is the counter here, which is the idea, right? So now it modified that properly. The thing here is that we'll still.
And then the third way to navigate is using these navigation buttons that get added.
Is that we're still actually showing is that. You know, go to idea, we're still showing shopping list, which is quite interesting. Go to idea and that kind of stuff. That's interesting. That's interesting.
With React Navigation. So
Oh, That's interesting. That's interesting. Again, this is part of the navigation there.
We actually get these header buttons, so I can go back all the way up and down a stack. That rhymed unintentionally.
All the way up in the
Next
stack.
up, let's look at modal navigations. So rendering a screen as a modal means rendering it on top of other content. So important thing to note that in order for this to work, the modal needs to be defined above or adjacent to the screens it's being rendered on top of. So in particular, if you have a bottom tabs navigator and you have a stack inside your bottom tabs and you make one of those screens a modal, it won't get rendered on top of your app. You need to define it at the top level. So in our case, our structure is quite flat. So we can change any of these screens to be rendered modally by using the options. So I've actually not even defined the screens here, and actually this is again a good example. So this is something that throws off people initially, because especially when you're coming from React navigation, you think that you need to define the screens for them to exist. But because we're using file system based routing, you'll see that all this navigation works even though these screens aren't even defined. So the only reason we really define them is to add additional properties here. So let me copy these so I could do our counter and our idea. So counter, our idea. And this will change this heading that is rendered. And let's pass in presentation.
Oh, to matches now the idea there. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But this is quite okay because it's now using its screen option. Okay. And now we're gonna render several of them. Right? So not only this, but also is this another one, this another one. And each one of them needs to be wrapped in a stack. That makes a lot of sense. Each one of them needs to be stacked in a stack and the stack screen.
But
again, okay. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense why this actually barely work. I am good at finding error, bro. Stack.screen, and it's here when you can say, hey, the name of the screen will be is counter. When you find counter, please, I want you to show now is the screen. In other words, you do this when it has the options, makes a lot of sense, to this one. Title in this case is counter, right? Or you got a lot of this one. Got it. Name option. All right. So if we navigate to this, we're able to see now this is as index. When it's a counter, it shows the counter properly. You go to the idea, it show idea. Interesting. So you can now specify on the layout, hey, how we're going to show is the different screen that you want to go with. Okay. So of course it override that, so we're gonna call this index, and this will be is the shopping list. So shopping list, and here this counter will be now is the idea, and I want to show this now idea. Okay. Again, navigation here works quite interesting. You go to idea, and then you go back to this counter and shopping list. Okay.
Because we're using file system based routing, you'll see that all this navigation works even though these screens aren't even defined. So the only reason we really define them is to add additional properties here. So let me copy these so I could do our counter and our idea. So counter, idea, and this will change this heading that is rendered. And let's pass in presentation modal. So whoever asked earlier about how to do your own custom alerts, then this is how you do them. So you can render a screen as a transparent modal, and then the content of the modal will be the alert. So let's do modal. And now if I go to counter, you actually see that it gets rendered on top. And if I do another presentation modal here as well, then there you go, you get the modals all the way down. And the interesting thing about this is that on Android, again, this actually looks different. So this is rendering a modal, but it looks similar to a screen. So this, again, is not a bug. It's just the Android appropriate navigation. You can change how these screens are presented by using the animation. So there's a couple, you can configure your own animations, you can build your own, this is supported, but there's a couple here that are built in. So for example, I could use a fade animation. So if I go to counter, this will render as a modal, but then it will fade in the other screen. So let's try a different one. Slide from bottom, let's do that one. There you go, so now we get slide from bottom here, and then on Android, you actually get this to start from slide from bottom as well. So if you do want it to slide from bottom on the Android, this is how you do it. And then finally, we have our bottom tabs navigation. So this is something you see in almost every mobile app. So bottom tab.
Interesting. Okay. So we got right now is our okay, so we have here our stack navigation. Okay, so this is now stack navigation. Okay.
Tabs which have may have many screens inside. So in the days of not having Expo Router and doing this with React Navigation, this would have actually been really tedious, and it's the reason that I didn't include bottom nabs in my last React Native intro to the React Native workshop, because it would have taken ages to do and be quite complicated. But we are using Expo Router, so I'm getting rid of my presentation modules here.
That makes a lot of sense. So navigation here, or animation
so
navigation,
in the days of not having Expo Router and doing this with React Navigation, this would have actually been really tedious, and it's the reason that I didn't include bottom nabs in my last
There is a reason that I didn't include bottom nabs in
my last React Native intro to the React Native workshop, because it would have taken ages to do.
Oh my god. Oh my god, option, title, presentation, and animation. Options, and in the option you can pass is how it's gonna do the transition. Okay. Okay. And here you can say is Presentation and animation. Presentation. It doesn't actually show me the options here. No definition found. Presentation. It doesn't show me anything here. Modal. It's similar to the animation. Oh, there you get it. This is the way how we do this. Let's say fade from the bottom. Okay.
And be quite complicated, but
thanks to
we
TypeScript,
are
bro.
using Expo router, so I'm getting rid of my presentation modals here. So all we need to do to convert this stack navigator into a bottom tabs navigator is we're going to select all these stacks and change them to tabs. There you go, ta-da! And it's amazing, you can now next and change them to tabs. There you go, ta-da! And it's amazing, you can now navigate between them. You have some bottom tabs. And thing to note is that the previous navigation methods that we added, so the navigation using a link, this still works, and the use route and like programmatic navigation, this still works. So you can navigate between the screens the same way. Obviously there is no animation here because we're using bottom tabs. But we can actually remove these navigation buttons because you have our bottom tabs now.
And all what you want to do is you want to change that navigation instead of a stack to a tabs. It's just to say, hey, this will be now a tabs. So import that. And on any instance of the stack, I want you to replace that.
These obviously there is no, there's still change them. So all we need to do to convert this stack navigator into a bottom tabs navigator is we're going to select all these stacks.
So you're going to select all of these tabs. And replace them with stack.
And change them to
change it to tabs. Of course, there is no animation here for that. It doesn't work.
tabs.
And so if we reload this, there you get it. Now we got our tabs.
There you go, ta-da! And it's amazing, you can now navigate between them. You have some bottom tab to tabs. This stack navigator
what you is this is this is what what is this? Command D. Okay. All right. So here you say is this one, then Command D. D. Holy hell! And then you say, hey, it will be called now stack. And they change now to a stab. And if you want to change all of this, you say, hey, select that, and now replace that with tabs. And as you can see, we got now able to navigate to this. With the counter, of course, because this kind of navigation is not per screen, or no, this is not a stack. For that, there you got it. Or under. Okay. Command Shift L. Okay. So that's interesting to select all of that. All right. So I'm gonna make a quick pause here, and I'll be right back. And we're back after a couple days. In this case, finally, well, we are going to wrap these sections up, the navigation. And now how the navigations on like the web is suddenly, it's quite different from mobile. So understanding now this subtle difference between that on the web you have is different type, you have is one type of navigation, which is using the A-link, right? Now on mobiles you have is stack animations, stack one one on top of another, right? The modal, just putting models in top of that, and the another one which is stacked by default. So what we're doing here is in tabs. So we have now these three main type of navigations in our app, which is stack by default, the tabs, which is something that we actually can see here on our device. On this tab, we implement that. Actually, this comes from the Expo router, which is a wrapper around React navigation, React Native navigation, where unlike that, this provides now a file-based routing mechanism. So you only need to, if you come from a web development, for example, like Next.js, which is actually using that. Now here, on React Native apps using Expo, you can actually add some of this functionality that are quite hard to do, that requires a lot of work to do. So for example, the transitions and the type of transitions. So something that we looked at yesterday. So for example, here when you say, hey, the transition transition is this one? Transition was the name? Presentation, my bad. I think it's presentations. No, it's not here. Oh, because this is now a tab, right? So if we want to replace all of this with stack navigation, so for example, you say, hey, this is now a stack navigation, right? And it's going to run. It's going to run Expo here, not right now, because we're going to expose now the presentation. Again, this is only in the stack. Is where you say, hey, I would like to give me is the option that I can go with, right, on the presentation. Why not? Exactly, right. So you get now the car, contain model, format, model, transparent, right? So if you use, for example, as a model, right now here, the presentation, and also you can choose the animation here. Animation. So what is the type of animation that you want to go with? Default or the iOS, or from left to right. At least this is something you can create your own animations, but use the ones that are by default. Right? Simple push, slide from bottom. So for example, like this, right? And if we now run the server here with Metro Bundler, and we refresh our, we reload this. Now we're able to, when we say, hey, let's go to the counter, you can see now it presents that as a model. So you have now in navigations, in React Native navigation, or in mobile navigation, is at least these three types of navigations that is provided from Expo router. Again, it's a wrapper around React navigations. So unlike React navigations, which is quite handy, but when it comes to give you this particularly animations and type of presentation, it's quite hard to do that. My question is that if you're going to implement Expo router, it means you're going to change the structure of your application, especially if you come from a React Native app, right? So on React Native apps, you define everything not in the router, right? But in fact is on the pages, and then you internally link all of those pages from one page to another, which is quite hard to follow. So this file-based navigation, or this convention from the web, it makes much more intuitive of what are the screens that we want to show. And again, there is a difference between screens and the pages, because pages is on the web is because the way how now the internet works, or the web works, which is with the server and the client. So the server actually is the client, anytime it wants to navigate to a particular URL, is asking for a document, and then the server now render that and send over that page. So now on the client side, once it receives this stream, this HTML, this CSS, and JavaScript, it passed through the critical rendering path, which is a mechanism of how to transform all of this information in this particular format. The HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are transmitted in binaries over the cable, and then they are decoded and transformed into a proper relevant format thanks to the OC model, which is the way of how now different computers can communicate, how different computer systems can communicate, whether the architecture, the composition, right? But as long as they implement this open system interconnection, we can now exchange that. This is something interesting in terms of know a little bit of the history of that. Because in the 50s or in the 60s, since there was a boom of all of these computer systems and languages, back then they need to have a way or a standard to make all of these different computer systems and languages to communicate each other. So this is go a little bit beyond the scope of this, but it's important to describe that because all of this now stands on this foundation. So in the case of the pages, we call that for the web, and in the mobile browser we call screens. So that's pretty much what we create here, is screens. So especially if you follow the Expo router, where you initially must have an index where you're going to show the initial screen, and then the other different screens that you can go with. And it's quite interesting to define all of these React UI elements, aka screens, with that name, right? At least in React Native. So far, so good. Okay, now, what are we gonna do in this video is, well, keep looking at all the other different type of navigation. We're not gonna dive deep in this video on navigation because at the end of the day, this is just the React Native intro of, well, the library itself. So I just want to explore this, how all of these different mechanism works, and which is something that I made here. Follow me along here a little bit, which is now a course taught by Katie Craman, a software engineer that previously worked at Formidable as a director of engineering mobile, and now she is currently at Expo. She's a software developer at Expo, this framework around React Native. So Expo is this. So Expo comes. So the value proposition of Expo is that, hey, because React Native is exclusively to build user interface, now. So the React Native team is just wants to integrate the web and the mobile development into one single development workflow. So you have now write once, build everywhere, or I think is write once, run anywhere. Exactly, that's the premise of React, right? Especially that comes from Java. I think is React as well, or learn one. So the premise of React Native is learn once, write anywhere, right? Allegedly. So, and because React Native only is just this library that allows you to now define its user elements. So React, by the way, is now works on the web, and it has a particular mechanism to make that happen. So to now update the current states of your UI into a new one. For example, a button, when you click that, you're going to show a new state from that, or a input when you type something, let's say your name, your first letter, and then now the next state is this new or this first character, and the subsequent state is this second character, and so on and so forth. And the idea of React is like that, right? So help you to now write this user interface. It was made by Facebook. Now they, in 2011, they open source that. And well, the way of how this works is by passing by passing through 3 phases. You have the trigger, the render, and the commit. The TLDR of this is that these different phases is guaranteeing now that your UI elements is going to now keep tracking and show when an state update happened. So in the case of React Native, because they're using is now React to write that to write your UI components. But behind the scenes, it has an architecture which is made of the rendering system called Fabric. You can take a look at this, right? The rendering system called Fabric. What Fabric actually does is trying to now produce or to make as much update or rendering logic. So bind as much as rendering logic to C++. In other words, to work directly to the native directives on the platform, whether it's on iOS or Android or Windows, and the way how that works is, again, it has now, or the mechanism, it has several phases. So you have is the render, what it now initially produces is the React element tree in JavaScript, which will be the input to create now the, or from that, you're gonna create now the React shadow tree, which is in C++. So once it has this, on the commit phase, which is also the phase of where you know what will be is the elements that it needs to mount and calculate the layout in that phase. Then is when on the mount phase, which is something like this, is on the mounting phase, as I described here, is on the mounting phase. This React Shadow 3, which contains the representation of the UI elements that are going to be mounted, okay, with the result calculation, it now transforms into a host view 3. And this host view is now the instructions that is going to be run on that device. And that device actually understand. Whether it's on Android, for example, Android.widget.text input or view and so on. So this is quite interesting, okay? Because this is now the assembly line, the mechanism of this React commit and mount happen. And because this rendering pipeline can happen in different threads, you have now the main thread, which is when the mount step happen, as they suggest here, right? So the only thread that can manipulate is the host view, which is the UI threads, and the JavaScript thread, which is where the React render phase happen, as well as the layout, from the pipeline. So this is the rendering pipeline, the React render phase and commit, as well as the layout are executed, right? And it's important to understand this, and also the build tools like Hermes, which is something that we haven't dived into that. Yep. But this bundle Hermes, so this page gives you an overview of how Hermes and React Native are built. If you're looking into instruction of how to use Hermes in your app, you can find instruction of this. Caution: please note that this page serves as a technical deep dive in target for users which are building extension on top of Hermes of React Native. Okay. General users of React Native should not need to know in-depth information of how React Native and Hermes interact. But what is a bundle Hermes? Starting with React Native 0.769, every version of React Native will be built alongside to a Hermes version. We call this distribution model. So from 0.69 on, you will always have a JavaScript engine that has been built and tested along each React Native version that you can use. But this bundle or build tools, right? What is bundle Hermes? To a Hermes version. I think Hermes is an open source JavaScript engine optimized for React Native. Okay, so Hermes now is the JavaScript engine optimized for React Native. That makes a lot of sense. So the build tool is now React Native will be built alongside to a Hermes, this JavaScript engine optimized for React Native. So I make this quick overview just to understand a little bit more and be able to describe what's going on anytime we want to use one of the React Native directives, what's happening behind the scenes, and now let's go to what we really care, which is the navigation in itself. All right, let's get into this. Cool.
Yeah, ta-da! And it's amazing.
All right, so let's go into change this to let's go to let's going to change this to say going to change to I think it's the layout. Select a window to switch to. Select a window. Oh, what about? Okay. This is on the settings. Okay, perfect. So this is layout. Okay, and here let's going to change now the stack here. by saying, hey, all of this occurrence of this tag, I want to now replace that with tabs, and that'll be all. So of course there's some property here that are not relevant to this. For example, like this. If we go back to a terminal, as you can see, we actually now implementing is this tab. All right, so far so good. It's pretty straightforward. You now here, based on, because it's behind the scenes following is this file-based routing mechanism, is allow you to now is define is what will be the layout for this entry point, at least for the shopping list, right? So what will be is the entry point of your app. So because here we're showing is this one, right? That's how you can define that. We can also navigate to that, but we can go back to this. So, all right.
You can now navigate between them. You have some bottom tabs. And thing to note is that the previous navigation methods that we added, so the navigation using a link, this still works, and the use route and like programmatic navigation, this still works. So you can navigate between the screens the same way. Obviously there is no animation here because we're using bottom tabs. Alright, but we can actually remove these navigation buttons because we have our bottom tabs now.
Exactly. So since here we can now remove this navigation here. This was just to illustrate how you can navigate between pages, whether it's programmatically or from the link bottom. You can also take a look at the idea here. No, and index. No. And also remove is this link, right? So we get rid of this particular kind of navigation, at least the stack navigation. So here we're going to use is just a tab navigation. Okay.
And remove it from the index screen as well. Lovely. And what would the bottom tabs?
So if we go back here, we don't have that. Lovely. Awesome. And it's showing now the proper content there because we put that on the layout. And now here, so for example, if you don't put now this as the counter, so here now it's showing is a shopping list, counter, and idea. So if for some reason you want to add more to this, let's say, hey, I'm gonna add this base here, right? And this will be now is, for example, let's say, hey, you have, so hey, let's say idea 2, because I don't have right now much more creativity. Just want to test this and say, hey, it will be idea 2, right? So if I add this page, this is supposed to be added to the okay, it's not being added because at the layer you're specifying is, hey, this is how it's gonna be, this is how it's gonna look like. This is how it's gonna look like. So however, if I say, hey, the name of this component, it'll be now, let's say, or pad scratch scratch, right? It's gonna put this as patch scrap and navigate to this as patch scrap, right? So if I make a reference here to this patch scrap into the layout, where you say, hey, now I want you to add is the patch scratch page. Okay, the patch scratch page with this title, right? Which is patch scratch. Now exists in nested children. Bridge warning, layout children, no route name patch scrap exists in nested children. Okay, perhaps some patch scrap. Okay, so when I try to render that, it say, hey, there is no route name patch scrap. That's interesting, but I made that. A nested children counter idea index sitemap. Oh, it's like you didn't add that? That's weird. So if I reload this, exactly. All right, so you add that. You got it. And we can navigate to the patch scrap, the idea and the counter as it is, you know. But the point of this is the layout that indicate how this gonna look like, and then depending on the type of navigation, whether it's in a stack or tabs, right? Particularly here on the tabs, you say, hey, I'm going to make a reference to this tab, so when you click here, I want you to show this screen, which is the patch scratch. Makes a lot of sense. Now, now let's going to get rid of the patch scrap because we're not gonna use that. Just wants to know more about that, and here we can change that to counter. That's right. And when we take a look now at the simulator, nope, hasn't changed there. It's going to reload this. Okay, and then you got it. Shopping list, counter, and idea. Good. Cool. Cool.
Without some beautiful bottom tabs icons. So by default, you're getting this triangle that tells you, I don't have an icon, so we can choose one. And thankfully, we can use our Expo SVG icon library. We can render anything there, it's just a React component, but we're going to use some icons from the SVG library. So, did I list which icons I chose? I did not. But if we go to Expo Vector Icons, I think I searched for list. I think this was it. Alright, so we have our list icon. You can choose a different icon. And let's go to our layout file and import it. And we can pass in the bottom tabs icons from our options object. So let's copy this. And the key that we're looking for is a bottom, it's tab bar icon. And this is a function that returns a React component. So you can pass in anything here. You can pass in a image or a text or your own component, but let's just pass in this icon. Lovely. Okay, so one thing you notice.
Okay. So, yeah, because we're using this now Expo here, and we're gonna now add some icons here to this navigation. Let's get into this. Let me get rid of this, right? And add now that icons to that, which is by navigating to, in this case, to Expo icons, right? Which is something that comes built in React Native, which is a great thing. So we don't actually need to go over to whatever icons or try to import our own and so on and so forth. So yeah, Expo vector icons, Expo vector, yes, Expo vector icons. You can browse the different icons here. Let's say is what is it? Feather. Show me here. Come here. This is not feather. Why?
I think this was
Exactly. It's a list, not a feather. It's a list. That's right. Oh, interesting. Holy moly, bro. Okay. The list, as it is, import feather from Expo vector icons feather, import the icon family, import the render component. Okay. So just here, because now Expo provides this set of icons that you can go with, right? Which is a very convenient stuff. It's very compelling to go with this, since all of these icons you can go with is the way how you can search this is through that web app that they made. Here we're gonna use this component, so you need to import the icon family and then use the component. And let's get into this. So there you got it. Oh, let me be here so you can see me there. All right. Can I do this? No, I need to do this. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that'll be much better. That'll be much better. No. Much better. Okay. Good. So, so let's going to import this component here. And now have access to the... No, this is on the layout. Exactly. This must be on the layout, because it's here that I want to not only import that, but at this tab screen component, I want to add now some sort of options here. It's like a tab icon, tab bar icon. Thanks TypeScript for autocomplete that. Jesus. And this now return is a React component. Yeah, this now return is a React component. Okay, exactly. It mentioned. Top bar icon is now a React node. It returns that. You know, here is actually telling you what to do. This is one of the things with TypeScript, is that it gives you a lot of introspections. So you don't need to even go look at the documentation for it. You just only need to read what it tells you. Again, do some introspections, and then quickly you're figuring out your way. So since this is a React component, right? And in our case, I want to now return is this component, right? I'm doing also this because it's part of the way of understanding how the things work. You know, this is it. When we go to the simulator, there you got it. You know, things work the way it is. There's nothing magical stuff here. You just have a particular way to do. There is stuff. So go on. Now, that was quite good. That was quite interesting. Yep.
Alright, so we have our list icon. You can use a different icon. And let's go to our layout file and import it.
Exactly.
And this is a function that returns a React component. So you can pass in anything here. You can pass in a image or a text or your own component. But let's just pass in this icon. Lovely. Okay, so one thing you notice that when I navigate to these other tabs, then the icon changes color to blue. But when I navigate to the icon that I've just added, then the text changes color, but the icon doesn't. And we can actually use the color from this tab or icon function. So if I hover over it, it tells you the props that it passes in. So it tells me whether it's focused, the color that it should currently be, and then also the size. So let's use the color and the size, and let's pass these in.
The color and the size.
Lovely.
Oh, because they actually now give you is the dimension from that. So you don't need to fix that. Which is size and color. But from an object. Okay, so it received now as an object, and this object is say, hey, it will be the size, and this will be is now the color, right? Without this, no, without these quotes. Okay. So you take a look at this. Now we take these dimensions from there.
Going to be, and then also the size tab or icon function. So if I hover, the text changes color, but the icon doesn't. And we can actually use the color when I. Okay, so one thing you notice that when I navigate to these other tabs, then the icon changes color to blue. But when I navigate to the icon that I've just added, then the text changes color, but the icon doesn't. And we can actually use the color from this tab or icon function. So if I hover over it, it tells you the props that it passes in. So it tells me whether it's focused, the color that it should currently be, and then also the size. So we don't need the return keyword. There we go. Alright, and then we'll want to do the same for the counter and the idea. So for the counter, I think we can look at a clock. I think this one looks good.
Okay. So for the counter and then for the idea. Okay, let's go to look at the bottoms here, or the icons here. That's interesting. So you say, why this doesn't work? This is interesting. Anyway, the counter clock, we pick up this one. Actually, then it becomes mechanical, you know. Then it becomes mechanical. So hey, you want to add some of this. Yeah, then it becomes mechanical. So but the idea here is that you need to understand what it's doing. So now it's replicate that. So in this case, when we build this tab, you're gonna pass the tab icon, tab bar icon. Since this is a React component, because we want it to now is provide to these icons the ability to change its color and to stay on the same size as the other elements. That is provided by the tab, which is this Expo router, right? I'm assuming that this is now a directive and a wrapper around a directive that they have on the way how you navigate into those platforms, whether it's on Android and iOS, that kind of stuff. So size and color, okay, and you can do just this. Say, hey, now I'm going to copy and paste this, and let me pass now the color, is the size and the color. And the color, right? So if I do this, it's wrapped then instead of a, wrap that it doesn't correct me here. ESLint, please help me here. There you got it. Long live to ESLint. Jesus, French toast guy. It helped me to correct common it helped me fix some commons gotchas. Like that. It's like Jesus. Alright. So now this was just for the counter. As you can see, it's now changing to the counter. Lovely again. And let's go to now look at the idea.
Pass these in. Yeah, I think I used a light bulb. Yeah, let's go for a light bulb.
So let's go for light bulb here.
So light bulb.
Light bulb.
This one is good.
From where? From 5. Light bulb. This one. Again, it becomes like mechanical. I was looking at the components to import, and then I'm going to now render the components here in this particular tab. Inside of the options, you say, hey, tab icon, tab bar icon. Thanks for the correction TypeScript. And well, this is now a React component, which is we pass that as a JavaScript function. That's going to render is this. So now ESLint help us here by saying, hey, let me wrap this into parentheses. So there you got it. Now, because if you look right now at the idea, when we click here, it's like, hey, it doesn't actually put the icons with the color, but the name it is. So well, let's go to now get that information, okay, and pass that is size. You got it, size and color. Now we can see that actually it highlight appropriate the icon. So yeah, pretty much that is it.
Destructure the color and size and pass them in. Is actually that you can define them at a global level. So if you want to change what color you're using in this top level tabs component, it has options as well. So you can use screen options, and here you can do tab bar active tint color. So there's also an inactive tint color, and let's use our beautiful cerulean color. So theme, import theme, and color cerulean. There you go. And you can see that both the text and the icon actually change color.
Again, this is you want at the, okay, if you want to change the color of this, you can have access to the screen options similar to the stack as well, and pass now the theme. In this case, you have now theme, but again, there is a property here that you can have access, which is color theme active. Okay, active. Really? An object, so active tab bar tab bar active theme color. You say, hey, this will be now the theme. That's quite interesting because that's what you want to have with native Win. If you want to now pass at least some sort of options, okay. If you're gonna pass programmatically color options, so native Win actually is a good candidate for that. Makes a lot of sense. Or the CSS class, if you want to configure your components or React components in a particular way. Okay, that's good. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Okay, so theme.color cerulean. When we save this and we go back here, we saw that now it's actually printed in the cerulean color. Okay.
And the final topic around navigation is nesting navigation. So in native land, you can nest navigators pretty much infinitely. So a stack within a tab, or a stack within a stack, or a stack within a modal, or a stack within a stack within a stack. You can.
Okay. So that'll be all for modal and bottom tab navigation. So it's going to now stop here. All right, and say, hey, git status. Let me add everything here and say git status commit with a message of modal and bottom tab navigation. In this case is tab navigation, right? Tab navigation, like so. That's right. And let's get into another one. So this is now nested navigation. Nested navigation. Stack navigation. Did you have stack navigation? Modal and tabs. Makes a lot of sense. So we're gonna do is now the nested navigation. So nested navigation. Okay, so this Expo icons is quite interesting here to add that to the collection. I'm going to now to our code, open the readme here and say, hey, exactly, we already add this, which is a great stuff. All right, but the other is this is Expo vectors and navigation. Makes a lot of sense. And some of the vector icons that they have
pretty much go infinitely. So stack within a tab is nesting navigation. So in native land, you can nest navigators pretty much infinitely. So a stack within a tab, or a stack within a stack, or a stack within a modal, or a stack within a stack within a stack. You can pretty much go infinitely. So to convert a screen into a stack, the process differs whether the screen is a named screen, like your home screen or idea screen, or whether it's an index screen. But regardless, we're going to convert the file into a folder and then make it the index screen of that folder. So we're going to add a history tab so we're going to have a stack in our counter tab. So this will be a stack navigator inside of a tab navigator.
So we're gonna have a
tab
tab.
to.
Okay.
So we're gonna have a stack in our counter tab.
Okay, makes sense. Good. So nested navigation. So we can have. So we can combine. So we can combine different. So we can combine different types of navigation. Navigations in plural. Navigations like stack within a tab. Exactly, stack within a tab. A multiple tabs in a stack. Stack on a model. Okay. Stack on a model, right? In this case, we are going to build is a stack on the counter tab, right? Pretty straightforward.
So this will be a stack navigator inside of a tab navigator.
Mm-hmm.
And
it will be a stack navigator inside of this will be a stack navigator inside of a stack
we're going to add a screen for the history here. So to do this, tab navigator, and we're going to add a screen for the history here.
Mm-hmm.
So to do this,
screen for the history.
So this is the screen that we want to convert into a stack.
Mm-hmm.
So in our app directory, let's create a new folder and call it counter.
You call it counter. That's right. Which is
and
now
move our counter file into our folder. And rename it
to
index.
an index. You know, it becomes pretty.
So notice that the screen path, the href, the URL didn't change because it used to be called counter, and now this screen is the index file of the counter folder, so it's still called counter.
So which is a counter. Isn't there a reload? Well, but this is very specific to Expo, so yeah.
Alright, so now we need to add a layout file here. So that's in our counter folder.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do _layout.
And this is what is going to be
and
shown.
By default, let's do a stack. So export default layout.
Layout stack.
So default function layout.
You can say function layout or simple
and
layout.
we'll return a stack, which is imported from Expo router, and we'll have a
stack.screen. No.
This is the name. And we're doing stack.screen.
Exactly.
Name index. Okay. So go to counter. Okay, so this is something that you'll often have when you nest navigators. You end up with two navigation headers, and the way to deal with it is that you hide the one that you don't need. So in our case, I'm pretty sure that so let's do an options. Let's give it a title counter.
It's gonna be rendered.
So now we have two headers that are called counter. But which one do we hide? So in this case, we actually want to hide the outer one, so the one that we defined first. The reason being is that we're going to have two screens in this inner stack, and we want to show the header of the inner stack screen, so we want to hide the outer one. So in our root layout, let's go to counter and do header shown false. And now we have our single header. All right, and the
So we
last
want is to now is
so we want to
to
hide the outer one. So in our root layout, in this
we want is to hide is the outer.
okay, so now we have two headers that are called counter, but which one do we hide? So
Okay. So far, let's go to now create this stack navigation, this nested navigation. Let's get into this. So here is the way you do this by saying, hey, I want to create a file inside of the app that'll be now, I want to create a folder here, say make there, a pattern here, and I wanted to create the index.tsx, right? It actually create now the index.tx. Oh, it didn't create that, but this is the counter. So it create that with the index.tsx. Okay, to access that will be is counter index. You say counter index.tsx. It'll be a pain in the ass to access that. What is that? It's like it create. Oh, it's because it create now a folder there. I get it. Yeah, it's because okay, and then create your file, or instead of doing this, you say move the app.counter.tsx to app.counter here, right? When you do that, remove that. This is great. And this counter, we want to create now a layout folder there by saying, hey, touch on the app counter is going to create now a layout folder, files, sorry. We go to the layout on the counter. We now import the stack here, but first defining is the React Native function. Export default. Everything here must be exported by default. Export default function layout, and well, I want you to return is the stack from the Expo router, okay, followed by the stack.screen with the name of counter, right? And there you got it, and that'll be all, right? And that'll be all. Thanks to ESLink, it's actually helped us to correct some of the common fix problems, which is putting out this parenthesis here. If we navigate, if we go to here, we're now able to see is interesting, one counter. Oh, okay. So name index is name index. Okay.
in this case, we actually want to hide the outer one, so the one that we defined first.
Okay, name index, and then you say, hey, options with the title counter, right? And this will now link. Oh, it's not running. Makes a lot of sense. Let's make that happen. Okay. We launch that here. Navigate to counter. We see the to counter here. So the technique here, no route name index exists in nested child counter, because we need to rename that into index, right? This can cause confusing behavior during navigation. No confusion anymore. And now the idea here is to hide the outer counter here. This is the technique here. Okay, I think this is quite interesting. This is a technique here. Okay. This is a technique here. This is a technique here. Okay. Yeah, this is a technique here. Since stacks, exactly. Since, okay, a technique to, yeah, this is something you can look at that, but a technique to hide or to show, a technique to show the relevant tab or the relevant stack header is by hiding the outer one. So if you go back to the stack here, in this case on the layout and on the counter, there is some other options here that you say, hey, header show, or header shadow visible, header show. As false. Header show.
The reason being is that we're going to have two screens in this inner stack, and we want to show the header of the inner stack screen, so we want to hide the outer one. So in our root layout, let's go to counter and do header shown false.
And voila.
And now we have our single header. Alright, and the last thing we need is to actually be able to navigate to it. So with the React navigation, we have some, we can use header buttons, which is quite a convenient way to navigate to it. So with the React navigation, we have some, we can use header buttons, which is quite a convenient way to navigate between screens. So in our layout file, the counter layout file,
wait, what you gonna do?
The thing we need is to actually be able to navigate to it. So with the React navigation, we have some, we can use header buttons, which is quite a convenient way to navigate between screens.
Okay.
So in our layout file, the counter layout file, let's do
enable
header right, and this will be a function. Let's return some text. This is always a good thing to do. See that things are rendering. There you go. So this is where this icon or button or whatever you want is going to get printed. So to the right of the header. So in this case, I think it would be handy to use an icon button once more. So let's choose another one. let's do a history. What is a good history icon? Can't remember which one I use now. Maybe this one.
Okay, so so what we're gonna do here is to remember, we're gonna add this now, a stack on a tab navigation. Now, on that, since we hide the outer stack, so we show only the relevant one, which is this. That might be a good technique to do that kind of nesting navigation, especially if you have this use case. So stack screens, the index, you can say, hey, header right, to put some sort of stuff there, which is a React node. Okay, so this might be a very good place to actually now put is the history. Okay, so you get now is the history icon. Just going to go with that. Yep. So the history, this one is going to import that. Oh my god, this is a very compelling. There is a very compelling. It's going to the structure here, the size and the color, and put that here in the proper split spaces, right? And the size and color. No, does not exist. Okay, I thought it will. So that's a shame. Yeah, that's a shame. But there you got it. Here you can see is this icon on the right. And from there is now what? Showing a modal navigation? Stack navigation with a modal?
Well, it doesn't really matter which one you use, but I'm going to use... I want to use the same that I did in the example, so let me see. I use material icons, history. Okay. I'm just going to copy it from here for a bit of consistency. Alright, and then let's render this material icons, and it's called history. Size, let's do 32. And color, let's make it our grey color. Lovely. And now we want to use a link. So this is the link from Expo router. And let's do href. And we want to link to, so what's the screen? So we want to link to our history
screen. So we want to wrap
screen.
that link into the history.
That I've not added yet. Let's add a history screen.
Exactly.
So we need a new file called history.
Not there.
.tsx.
I love.
Alright, and I'm going to copy the contents of the idea file because it's just going to be a placeholder again. So call this a history. Lovely. Okay. Okay, so we want to link to this screen. So the app hole doesn't count, so it will be slash counter.
If that is
slash
under the counter,
history.
that'll be.
So here we'll do
you're gonna do is the counter slash history.
Slash history.
If you do that. So it's going to create now this particular navigation there. Just pretty straightforward. It's not that hard. So you say touch under the app counter. You're gonna create a file called history.tsx. All right. you open that file, so the history TSX, we look at the idea TSX, we copy this as a placeholder for the history here, and we rename this export default function that is from the Expo router, and to create your React components to the history screen. That's right. Just gonna rename this and put it here, history. Okay, and then you want to now reference to that from the counter index. Exactly. You know, from it's from the layout here on the counter. On that element, you want us to now reference using as the link from Expo router. That's right. And navigate to, in this case, statically to the counter slash, let's see, like this, so counter slash the history as it is. So if we navigate to this, then we click here on match route, it say, hey, counter history. That's interesting. So if I reload this and say, hey, let's go to reload this, and we go to counter and this, now it's actually redirect that correctly. You see, we create this stack navigation here. That was quite lovely, by the way. Oh yeah, it was.
Okay, and now when I click it, we can navigate. But one thing that's a little bit annoying here is like this button is actually quite small, so you have to like tap right on the button, and this is not great UX. You want to kind of increase the touchable area, so you know, butterfingered people like me who are just approximately pressing the button could also press it accurately. And if we actually wrap this in a pressable, there you go, we can use this thing called hit slop. So it's hit slop, and it basically defines an area around the pressable area, which also triggers the press. So let's do 20. And this actually won't work because if you pass in a component inside the Expo router link, you also need to mark it as child. There we go. So now this works, and notice that I can actually like press next to the icon now, and it will still open. So instead of having to press right into. So this is a great UX thing. If you're ever using icon buttons.
And this is another technique here that they have. So for example, okay, let's say you now define this, but it's because it is close to that. A lot of nuance here. So if you click, so you have the navigation here. This is the stack navigation that we implement with that. That's right. So as you can see, you have to actually click on the icon as it is. So if you want to expand that a little bit, you say, hey, let's going to use the pressable here, and now increase the area here. So it has some sort of method that's called hit slop. Exactly. So increase the area to 20. So you indicate that amount of, indicate that area. Is that it 20 pixels? Okay. However, this one works because now the link doesn't accept any
to the icon now, child. Because if you pass in a component inside the Expo router link, you also need to mark it as child.
If you want, but this is very specific. If you want to parse it, or if you want to pass it now a React Native to a Expo router link, you need to indicate, hey, as child. Okay. If you want to pass dynamic content to this Expo router, it of course do that kind of stuff.
There we go. So now this works.
And if we now want to increase the surface area, you see, it actually is. This is great for okay. Oh, because this is HTML. Okay. So this is great for increase the surface area to improve UX, of course. This is great for increasing the surface area to improve user UI.
And notice that I can actually like press next to the icon now, and it will still open. So instead of having to press right on top. So this is a great UX thing. If you're ever using icon buttons that don't have a defined border, this is a great thing to do for UX.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. This is git commit or git status of everything here to say git status say, hey, this is now at nested navigation, particularly nested navigation, a stack on a tab. Exactly. So on this tab, I want to add now stack navigation. Or you can also add the modal, for example. You know, by saying, hey, on the option, you say now the presentation, it'll be as a model, you know. And by doing this, you show now as like this. You're showing this. This kind of navigation can be at. I think I see that navigation can be overwhelming. It can be quite fucked up. Absolutely. It can be quickly becomes a fucked up, bro. It can quickly become pretty fucked up, bro. That's right. So we go back to our stack navigation as it is. And this is stack navigation is slide. This is part of the animation that you can go with. Okay. Interesting. 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 Very, very, very interesting. Absolutely. 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 the convenience of Expo router, since unlike React Native navigation, unlike React Native navigation, it provides file-based routing similar to Next.js. The convenience of Expo router, since you like React Native navigation, it provides file-based routing navigation similar to Next.js, making animations and transition quite easy. All right. The other is, this is the navigation, the convenience. Okay. The other is the types of navigations. So you have now a stack, the default one, the modal, and the tab. And nested navigation and techniques. Pretty much that is it. Pretty much that's it. This is it. Pretty much that's it. That was quite interesting. That's very, very interesting. Okay. Well, that'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye-bye.